That's
Sorry.
right.
I'm just going to do a wardrobe thing.
No,
Sit
okay, right on.
forward. Sit
Sit
forward.
forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, when I was a kid, Shakespeare was a name that everybody knew. You know, from the time I probably could speak English with any great facility, Shakespeare was important. Shakespeare wasn't important because I said it was important. Shakespeare was important, and I think that the reason that he is important is because more than any other writer, I think, before or since, at least in the English language, he's been able to encapsulate, to crystallize in language, perhaps the most intangible and impossible weapon that we have, if you will, or tool to express thoughts between human beings, to express emotions between human beings, to be able to communicate. Shakespeare has been able to make music of language and to convey with the structure of words. I'm very much a structuralist. I believe that the language itself is really a cultural or identity. It is a civilization. It constructs the thoughts of mankind into tangible, manipulable, concrete form so that we can express what it is that we're trying to convey. Only mathematics and music can compare, and I think Shakespeare was the master of all masters of it. For me, my favorite Shakespearean play that I've done. I haven't done them all, and I certainly want to tackle Lear before too much longer. I think I think an actor should be in middle age years when he plays it, and not too far over the line, just because of the energy that would be required to do it. But my favorite one that I've done this far is probably Macbeth, and followed short very quickly on the heels of on that is probably Aaron the Moor, just because I think Aaron the Moor is a radically liberated black man in an environment where there is no real reason to be that, and where people, and I love defending him because everybody thinks he's the chief villain or the archetypical villain of Shakespearean characters. But the reason I like Macbeth is that it is a trove of behavior. This man comes up with the idea to kill the king and to become the king himself, even though lots of people mistakenly believe that Lady Macbeth gives him the idea. She says, what beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? So this was a letter that he had sent on before King Duncan and he were going to go. So this is a man who was grappling from the very beginning, from the time he conceives of committing regicide, with the consequences of that. He knows exactly what the results of it will be. He does it anyway because of his ambition or whatever else other spiritual things are made manifest through his own creation or cogitation. It's a brilliant, brilliant play, and I say it because I don't think he ever loses his mind. I think there's a line in the fifth act that says something like, those who lesser hate him call him mad, right? Now, I don't think that he's mad, and because I don't think he ever has the luxury, the release of insanity to explain what it was he did or the consequences that derive therefrom. So I think that this is a man who is, as I think it was Harley Granville Barker, who said that he is representatively human. And I think that of all of those characters, we know Macbeth probably psychologically better than all of those other characters. Some of the rest of them are a little bit dense, like Hamlet is I think Othello is a complete idiot. I think that Lear is a little bit crazy and all of these, but Macbeth is not an idiot, nor is he crazy. And I think that he pays the price psychologically, psychically, spiritually, maritally. All of these things, there are consequences for his behavior. So to me, he is the most graspable of all of the characters I've had a chance to play it. Drama and literature, as a former school teacher, I think is vital And I know that it has really fallen by the wayside because of the budgetary crises that are befalling most of the public schools in any major urban areas. But I do know that as a child, from the time that I was in kindergarten, we would do little presentations and school assemblies and all of these things where you get to perform. I think that the ability to go outside of oneself and to transfer the emotional weight of being a child or a student or a human being, I think being able to wear a mask in some way or another is integral to a proper development. Being inside one's own head, having to do, particularly in a modern world where you have all this social media, where people are mediatized all the time. I believe that the average human being, the average American, is photographed 27 times a day, right? And that's things they don't even, they're not, I'm not talking about selfies. I'm talking about you walk out of the street with the GPS and all of this stuff and people doing these things to themselves with the Twitter and Instagram and all. So we are living as ourselves all the time and putting that on blast. And I think the ability to make a character out of this experience is vitally important. Otherwise, you wind up being self-consumed. One of the most interesting questions that I think we grapple with, and I whenever I do a Shakespeare play, there is not one time when somebody says, "Why are you doing that play? Why Shakespeare? Why Shakespeare's language? Why wouldn't you change the language and update the language?" Sometimes people are quite aggressive when they ask these questions. Particularly in the black community, you'll find people, well, nobody can understand this language. Why are you doing it this way with these words? Is Shakespeare relevant to us? My answer to that is, it is not that Shakespeare has to be relevant to us. We have to be relevant to Shakespeare. Shakespeare did not ask us to do his plays. He wrote those things 400 years ago or what have you. He did, whether or not we're doing them anywhere ever again, he's a dead man. So, his language lives and those plays live. But we approach Shakespeare because it resonates with us. And again, the ability that he had, unique, to put into words the human experience. All of lots of scholars like to use the word the muscularity and the passion, the poetry, these things. All of those things are part of the human language experience. English itself is an iambic language. These things we can find the metrical art in all of Shakespeare because he was able to find it in the language already. And so I think that it is our burden to show how we can be relevant to the Shakespeare. How would we do it? How is Shakespeare most resonant from our point of view and experience and perspective as Americans, as people of ethnic groups or nationalities or whatever other divisions we want to put ourselves into? The language is universal because the language is universal. Whether or not we say so, or whether or not we think so, that language is there. The reason that Shakespeare is so adaptable and the reason that people are consistently drawn to these, whatever it is, 42 plays, they're always finding new plays or that he at least had a hand in. I think it's up to like 42 now or something. But he didn't he didn't invent the ideas behind those stories. He took stories that were in existence. For example, Othello comes from the Hecatomythi or whatever it is, and Hamlet is an old legend, and Macbeth, he got that from whoever, Julius Caesar from Plutarch in history. But the reason is that those stories are interesting. And so people, when they're looking for something to talk about or something to do that they know will automatically and inherently bring weight to it, bring importance to it, bring pure joy and delight to it. What more romantic idea is there than forbidden love between very young people who, in spite of all the world, will find a way to express their love? What more important question is there in all of life than to be or not to be? That is the question. These are very foundational, ontological, philosophical things that whether or not we want to do them in a dramatized form or use Shakespeare's actual language, one has to consider that Shakespeare, Freud, Einstein, um, Ellington, these are people who have been able to give us our position. It's like a global positioning system. It gives you, it has mass and matter and weight. The idea of it is actually Aristotelian in some way. Aristotle talked about this idea. He called it entelechy, which is that that things that have virtue, things that are more purely themselves, things that are formed to represent what they really are at their most basic level, have more weight, have more reality, are more substantial. And I think that in terms of language, Shakespeare is able to do that. There is no getting rid of him. As long as we continue to speak English, as long as we continue to have the thoughts and ideas and emotions that he chronicled, there is no world without a Shakespeare. I've grappled with Shakespeare a lot. I actually had the great honor and sometimes great frustrations of dealing with August Wilson because we worked together directly when he was alive, and I loved and admired him greatly, as does the rest of the theater-loving world. But sometimes he got on my nerves. Sometimes he was, and I think, what would Shakespeare be like? And he got on my nerves because he was so great, and he was demanding, and he pushed, and he prodded. That's what great artists do. That's what great coaches do. That's what a great parent does. That's what great friendships and romances do. They challenge us to be better. They make us want to be better. We may not like it, but I think that the Shakespeare of it is always something we can aspire to. You're not going to find something more difficult than some of these plays. If you want to test your chops at the piano, you have to do Franz Liszt and Chopin. If you want to test your skills as a practitioner of great theater, you're going to have to do Shakespeare or August Wilson or somebody in that line. But I wonder sometimes if I would have liked Shakespeare. And I think in a lot of ways I probably wouldn't. I think, for example, that Othello has done more damage as a play to the perception of race in a kind of Western or English-speaking world than any other play. And again, I think that gets back to the structuralism of it. How did he view these people, many of whom he probably didn't know? There were some Elizabethans of African ancestry around that time, we know. But what did he know about them? Did he care about them? Did he have an evolved idea about them? I don't know. I would love to have a beer with him. And I would love to be able to sit down and we could find some sort of middle language that we could speak. Shakespeare is actually modern English. But if we could somehow find a way to communicate, I would love to just have a dinner with him and just talk about, man, where'd you come up with that? There's a really interesting thing, by the way. Some people went into one of his houses at Stratford, and they went through the crawl spaces and they found some pipes. And in the pipes there were remnants of nutmeg. And it is believed now, or at least it has been suggested, that Shakespeare smoked nutmeg, which had the same sort of effects as marijuana. So I think that he was high a lot. And I would be delighted to smoke some nutmeg, what do you do with Shakespeare, and see what we come up with.